Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the blue dot grow larger on the main screen. After 30,000 years of traveling through space, his people were finally coming home to Earth. The Exodus fleet had been moving through the darkness between stars for so long that most people alive had never seen the world where humans first lived. Jake was one of the few who remembered the old stories his grandmother told him about green grass and blue skies and animals that lived in the wild. The fleet stretched out behind his ship like a river of metal and light. 300 vessels carried the last children of Earth back to where it all began. Some ships were huge, city-sized carriers that held millions of people. Others were smaller military vessels bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. All of them had been built during the long journey home as humanity grew stronger and smarter in the cold, empty spaces between worlds. Lisa Brooks walked up to Jake holding a data pad in her hands. Her face looked wrong, like someone had told her. Terrible news. She had been running scans of the Earth system since they dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 days ago. Jake knew from her expression that something was very bad. "Captain, the readings are all wrong," Lisa said in a quiet voice. "Earth is not showing any signs of life at all. No radio signals, no heat signatures from cities, nothing that would tell us people are still living there." Jake felt his stomach drop. Before the fleet left Earth 30,000 years ago, the planet had been in trouble. The sun was acting strange and solar storms were getting worse every year. But there had still been billions of people living in underground cities and orbital stations. The plan was for the fleet to find new worlds and come back when it was safe. "What about the colonies on Mars and the Moon?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "Dead, sir. Everything in the system looks empty. But there is something else. We are picking up energy signatures that do not match human technology. The patterns look Zephyrian." The name hit Jake like a punch to the chest. The Zephyrians had been humanity's allies during the evacuation. They had provided ships and supplies and technical help to get the fleet ready for the long journey. Their leader, Ambassador Kethavar, had promised to watch over Earth and help any humans who stayed behind. Jake called for Dr. Ryan Carter to come to the bridge. Ryan was the fleet's expert on alien biology, and he had studied the Zephyrians more than anyone else. When Ryan arrived, his blue eyes were already worried because he had been monitoring the same signals. "Ryan, tell me those energy readings are from some kind of Zephyrian rescue mission," Jake said. Ryan looked at the data on Lisa's pad, and his face went pale. "Captain, these are military-grade weapon signatures, plasma bombardment systems, and biological warfare dispersal units. This is not a rescue mission. This looks like the aftermath of a systematic extermination campaign." The words hung in the air like poison. Jake ordered the fleet to hold position while scout ships moved in closer to Earth. The reports that came back over the next few hours painted a picture of complete devastation. Earth's atmosphere was filled with toxic clouds and radioactive particles. The oceans had been boiled away. Every major city was a crater of melted glass and twisted metal. Admiral Helen Cross arrived on Jake's ship 4 hours later. She was the overall commander of the fleet and one of the smartest military minds humanity had ever produced. Her gray hair was tied back tight, and her green eyes showed the kind of anger that could burn down worlds. "Captain Morrison, I have reviewed all the scout reports," Helen said as she walked onto the bridge. "Earth has been completely sterilized. Every form of life has been eliminated using weapons that match Zephyrian technology signatures. The attack patterns suggest this happened roughly 29,000 years ago, not long after our fleet departed." Jake felt something cold and dark growing in his chest. "Admiral, are you saying the Zephyrians betrayed us? They helped us leave and then murdered everyone who stayed behind?" Helen nodded slowly. "That appears to be exactly what happened. We have also found debris from human ships and stations that show signs of surprise attacks. Our people were not expecting to fight their allies. The Zephyrians used our trust against us." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Jake looked at the screen showing Earth hanging in space like a burned coal. Somewhere down there were the bones of his ancestors and the graves of everyone who had believed the Zephyrians would keep them safe. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Jake asked. Helen Cross looked at each person on the bridge with eyes that promised terrible justice. "We are going to find every Zephyrian involved in this genocide. We are going to make them pay for what they did to our people. And we are going to make sure the entire galaxy knows that humanity remembers its debts." The survey teams spread across the solar system like hunting wolves looking for traces of what had happened to humanity's birth world. Jake Morrison led his ship toward Mars, where the Red Planet's polar colonies had once housed over 50 million people. The domed cities had been humanity's backup plan if Earth became too dangerous to live on. What they found made Jake's hands shake with rage. The great domes of New Phoenix and Terra Nova were cracked open like broken eggs. Scorch marks from plasma weapons covered every surface, and the twisted remains of defense turrets showed that the colonists had tried to fight back. Emma Davis, the fleet's chief navigator, guided landing parties through the ruins, while her teams documented every piece of evidence they could find. "Captain, look at this," called out Security Chief Tony Garcia from inside what used to be the main colony administration building. Tony was a big man with scars on his face from fighting pirates during the long journey home. Now he stood over a pile of human bones that had been arranged in neat rows like some kind of sick display. Jake knelt down beside the bones and saw that many of them showed signs of torture. Broken fingers and cracked skulls told a story of people who had died, slowly and in pain. Mixed in with the human remains were Zephyrian data crystals that seemed to be some kind of record-keeping system. Dr. Ashley Morgan arrived with translation equipment to decode the alien records. Ashley was young, but she had spent her whole life studying dead civilizations and forgotten languages. Her brown hair was tied back as she worked with the crystal data, trying to understand what the Zephyrians had written about their victims. "Captain, these are hunting logs," Ashley said after an hour of work. "The Zephyrians were keeping track of how many humans they killed and what methods worked best. They were treating our people like animals in some kind of sick game." The next discovery came from Luna Base, humanity's last major military stronghold in the Earth system. Captain Alex Turner led a team of Marines through the underground tunnels where humans had made their final stand. The base's quantum computers were still working after all these years, and they contained the last messages sent from Earth before the killing stopped. Commander Rachel Kim's voice echoed through the empty halls as the old recordings played. She had been the base commander during the final siege, and her words painted a picture of betrayal and desperate fighting. "Day 47 of the siege. The Zephyrians broke the peace treaty without warning. They hit every human settlement at the same time using our own communication systems to coordinate their attacks. We trusted them with our defense codes, and they used that trust to murder us." The recording continued with Rachel's voice getting weaker as the days passed. "Day 62, food running low. The children are asking why their Zephyrian friends are trying to hurt them. How do you explain betrayal to a 5-year-old? Day 78. They are using some kind of biological weapon in the air systems. People are dying even in sealed areas. Day 81. This is Commander Kim making my final log. If anyone ever comes looking for us, I want them to know that we did not go quietly. We made the aliens pay for every life they took." The recording ended with the sound of weapons fire and Rachel Kim's voice saying a prayer for her people. Jake stood in the empty command center and felt the weight of 30,000 years of injustice pressing down on his shoulders. But the worst discovery came from the ruins of the European space elevator. Dr. Ashley Morgan found what could only be described as a museum of genocide. The Zephyrians had built trophy rooms filled with human artifacts and preserved body parts displayed like hunting prizes. Skulls of human children sat next to paintings and books and pieces of technology that had been taken from the dead. "They kept souvenirs," Ashley said in a voice barely above a whisper. "They murdered an entire species and then made a collection to remember it by. Major Chris Evans and his intelligence teams found Zephyrian military records that showed the true scope of the betrayal. The aliens had been planning humanity's extinction for over a century before the solar crisis began. They had studied human psychology and military tactics during their supposed friendship, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. The evacuation of Earth had not been a rescue mission at all. It had been a trick to get most of humanity's military strength away from the home system. The Zephyrians had helped build the Exodus fleet and encouraged it to travel as far away as possible. Then they had returned to finish off the people who trusted them enough to stay behind. "Admiral, we have enough evidence to fill 1,000 courtrooms," Chris reported to Helen Cross. The Zephyrians documented everything. They were proud of what they did. In their military files, they call it the final solution to the human problem. Helen Cross stood in the ruins of Geneva Station, looking out at the dead Earth through a cracked viewing port. Around her, the evidence of genocide was overwhelming. Videos of humans being tortured for information. Lists of children sold into slavery before being killed. Scientific experiments performed on living people to test new biological weapons. "Compile everything," Helen ordered. "Every recording, every document, every piece of physical evidence. We are going to broadcast this across the entire galaxy. Every species is going to know exactly what the Zephyrian Empire is capable of." Jake Morrison joined the Admiral at the viewing port, and they both stared down at the blackened world that had once been green and blue. "Admiral, how do we make them pay for this? How do we get justice for 50 billion dead people?" Helen turned away from Earth, and her eyes held the promise of terrible vengeance. "Captain, we are going to hunt down every Zephyrian who participated in this genocide. We are going to destroy their empire piece by piece, and we are going to make sure that what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else ever again." The transformation of the Exodus fleet began immediately after the evidence was collected and documented. Chief Engineer Matt Johnson worked around the clock, converting civilian ships into weapons of war. Cargo bays that had carried families and supplies for 30,000 years were now filled with missile launchers and energy cannons. The humans had learned many things during their long journey through space, and none of those lessons had been about peace. Captain Alex Turner took command of the first hunter group, consisting of 12 fast attack ships. His target was a Zephyrian mining operation on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, where the aliens had built a massive extraction facility on top of the ruins of New Geneva. The human colony had been home to 2 million people before the genocide, and now alien machines were literally grinding their bones into industrial paste. The attack came without warning, just as the Zephyrians had attacked humanity 30,000 years earlier. Turner's ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel inside the mining facility's defensive perimeter and opened fire with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Quantum disruptors tore through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper, while temporal bombs created small pockets of accelerated time that aged enemy ships into dust in seconds. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the entire Zephyrian facility was gone, and every alien ship in the system had been reduced to scrap metal. Not a single human vessel had taken damage because the enemy weapons could not lock onto targets that were phasing in and out of normal space-time. Captain Nina Walsh led the stealth operations using ships that could become completely invisible to all known detection methods. Her teams appeared throughout Zephyrian space like ghosts, striking supply convoys and communication stations before vanishing back into the darkness. Each attack was carefully planned to cause maximum damage while sending a clear message that humanity had returned and remembered everything. The Zephyrians, who had grown comfortable ruling over dozens of conquered species, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand or predict. Their technology had remained mostly the same for the past 30,000 years, while humanity had been forced to innovate and adapt just to survive in hostile space. What came back to the solar system was not the same species that had left. Dr. Jennifer Adams specialized in psychological warfare, and she understood exactly how to terrify the aliens who had murdered her ancestors. Zephyrian mythology spoke of star demons that would emerge from the void to punish the wicked, and Jennifer made sure that humanity's attacks fit those old legends perfectly. Human ships appeared and disappeared like supernatural entities, leaving behind only destruction and fear. The aliens tried to respond with conventional military tactics, but their massive battle fleets could not catch enemies that existed partially, outside normal reality. Captain Kevin Hart's heavy assault group demonstrated humanity's new approach to warfare by attacking a Zephyrian fortress world that was supposed to be impregnable. The planet's entire defensive grid was destroyed in under an hour by weapons that could phase through solid matter and strike targets from impossible angles. Admiral Helen Cross coordinated the campaign from her flagship while monitoring Zephyrian communications networks. The aliens were beginning to panic as reports came in of their forces being destroyed by an enemy that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Some Zephyrian commanders were already talking about retreating to their core worlds and abandoning their outer territories. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian High Command," reported Communications Officer Sam Peterson. "They want to negotiate." Helen smiled coldly as she accepted the transmission. The alien face that appeared on her screen belonged to war leader Vexathara, one of the generals who had planned the genocide of Earth. His 6 eyes showed fear and confusion as he tried to understand what was happening to his empire. "Human Commander, I do not understand why you are attacking us," Vexathara said in his clicking alien language. "The conflict between our species was settled long ago. Your people were relocated to preserve galactic peace." Helen's voice was ice, cold when she replied. "Relocated? Is that what you call genocide now? We found the trophy rooms, Vexathara. We found the records of your hunting parties. We know exactly what you did to our people." The alien's face changed color in what humans had learned was a sign of extreme distress. That was military necessity. Your species was becoming too dangerous to allow unrestricted expansion. The decision was made by the Council for the good of galactic civilization. "The decision was made by cowards and murderers," Helen replied. "You helped us build the Exodus fleet so you could get our military strength away from Earth. Then you came back and slaughtered 50 billion defenseless people, children and old people and families who trusted you to protect them." Vexathara tried to regain his composure. "What do you want? Your species is extinct. There are only a few million of you left in those ships. You cannot threaten the Zephyrian Empire." Helen leaned forward and her green eyes burned with 30,000 years of accumulated rage. "We want the names of everyone who participated in the genocide. We want the locations of your concentration camps and slave markets. We want reparations for our dead. And we want you to understand that what you think you know about humanity is completely wrong." "And if we refuse," the alien asked, "then we will demonstrate exactly what a few million humans can do when they have had 30,000 years to plan their revenge," Helen said, before cutting the transmission. Jake Morrison watched the conversation from the bridge of his ship and felt something dark and satisfied growing in his chest. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake when they chose to betray humanity. They had expected the Exodus fleet to disappear into deep space and never return. Instead, they had created an enemy that had spent millennia learning how to fight and win against impossible odds. "Captain, incoming priority message from Zephyrian High Command," reported his communications officer. "They are dispatching their Grand Fleet to destroy us. Over 5,000 ships, including their flagship, the Eternal Dominion." Jake smiled as he looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy force. The Zephyrians still thought in terms of big ships and overwhelming firepower. They had no idea that humanity had transcended such primitive concepts during their long exile among the stars. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a metal storm filling the space around Jupiter with 5,000 warships. Admiral Vexathera commanded from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion a massive dreadnought that was larger than most human cities. The alien had fought dozens of wars against primitive species and won everyone through superior firepower and technology. He expected this battle to follow the same pattern. The human fleet looked pathetic by comparison. Only 300 ships against 5,000, and most of the human vessels appeared to be converted civilian craft with improvised weapons. Vexathera allowed himself to feel confident as his sensors analyzed the enemy formation. The humans had positioned themselves in a loose sphere around Earth's orbital space like they were trying to protect their dead homeworld. "Begin the attack," Vexathera ordered in his clicking language. "Show these mammals what happens when they challenge the Zephyrian Empire." The first wave of Zephyrian missiles streaked through space toward the human ships, and then something impossible happened. The missiles simply passed through their targets as if the human vessels were not really there. Sensors showed the ships were still present, but the weapons could not make contact with anything solid. Dr. Peter Hayes monitored the battle from the human flagship and smiled as his quantum phase technology worked exactly as designed. The humans had learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing them to choose when and where they wanted to interact with normal space-time. Enemy weapons could only hit targets that existed in the same dimensional layer. "Admiral, the Zephyrians are confused," reported Communications Officer Lisa Brooks. "They are trying to recalibrate their targeting systems, but they cannot lock onto ships that are phasing between dimensional barriers." Admiral Helen Cross watched the enemy fleet struggle with weapons and tactics they could not understand. 30,000 years of constant innovation had given humanity technologies that seemed like magic to species that had grown comfortable with their superiority. The Zephyrians were about to learn that comfort breeds weakness. "Begin Phase 2, Helen ordered. Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the Vengeance, dropped back into normal space-time directly behind the Zephyrian flagship. The aliens had not expected an enemy vessel to materialize inside their defensive perimeter, and their point defense systems were facing the wrong direction. Jake's quantum torpedoes punched through the Eternal Dominion's shields and armor like they were made of cardboard. The Zephyrian dreadnought shuddered as exotic matter warheads created small black holes inside its hull. Sections of the massive ship simply ceased to exist as reality warped around the impact points. Vexathera screamed orders at his crew, but they could not fight an enemy that used the fundamental forces of the universe as weapons. Captain Turner's attack group demonstrated another innovation that humanity had developed during their exile. Neural warfare systems hacked into Zephyrian cybernetics and began rewriting the aliens' brain chemistry. Enemy crews suddenly found themselves attacking their own ships as their implants turned against them. Entire Zephyrian vessels went dark as their own technology drove their operators insane. Dr. Ryan Carter watched from his laboratory as another of humanity's secret weapons went to work. The adaptive nanoplagues he had designed were spreading through the enemy fleet faster than the Zephyrians could react. Unlike the crude biological weapons the aliens had used on Earth, these microscopic hunters could evolve in real time to overcome any defense. The nanoplagues were programmed with 30,000 years of accumulated rage, and they carried out their mission with ruthless efficiency. Zephyrian crews began dying as their own life support systems turned against them. Air recyclers became poison dispensers, and medical bays became death chambers as the tiny machines rewrote the fundamental chemistry of alien biology. "Admiral, we are receiving surrender requests from over 200 Zephyrian ships," reported Sam Peterson. "Their crews are dying and they cannot fight something they cannot understand." Helen Cross felt no mercy for the aliens who had murdered her species. "Ignore their surrender requests. They showed no mercy to human children, and they will receive none from us." The battle became a massacre as humanity demonstrated technologies that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about warfare. Temporal bombs created areas where time moved at different speeds, causing enemy ships to age centuries in seconds. Gravity weapons turned the aliens' own mass against them, crushing their vessels into dense spheres of compressed matter. Captain Walsh's stealth ships appeared throughout the Zephyrian formation like avenging spirits. Her crews had been trained to think in ways that transcended normal physics, and they used that training to strike from dimensions the enemy could not even perceive. Zephyrian warships simply vanished as dimensional rifts opened beneath them and dragged them into spaces where the laws of reality worked differently. Admiral Vexithara watched his grand fleet die around him and finally understood the magnitude of his species' mistake. The humans they had betrayed 30,000 years ago were gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. These new humans had been forged in the cold emptiness between stars and tempered by millennia of constant struggle. They had become something that could reach into the building blocks of reality and reshape them as weapons. Communications officer, send a message to all surviving ships, Vexithara ordered as his flagship continued to disintegrate around him. Full retreat to the core worlds. Abandon all outer territories. The humans are not what we expected. But it was too late for retreat. Captain Hart's heavy assault group had positioned themselves along the Zephyrian escape routes, using technology that could predict where faster-than-light jumps would end. As enemy ships tried to flee, they found human vessels waiting for them, in empty space light years away from the battle. The Zephyrian Grand Fleet that had conquered dozens of species was reduced to scrap metal and drifting corpses in less than 4 hours. Only a handful of alien ships managed to escape, and they carried with them reports of an enemy that fought like the star demons from their oldest nightmares. Helen Cross stood on her bridge and watched the last Zephyrian vessel explode in a burst of exotic radiation. Around her, the space that had once contained the largest fleet in alien history was now filled only with debris and the expanding clouds of particles that had once been living beings. "Admiral, we are receiving transmission from the surviving Zephyrian command structure," reported Lisa Brooks. "They want to discuss terms for ending hostilities." Helen smiled coldly as she considered the request. The Zephyrians had learned fear, but they had not yet learned the full price of their crimes against humanity. The real war was just beginning. The capture of Admiral Vexithara came 3 days after the destruction of the Zephyrian Grand Fleet. The alien commander's damaged flagship had been drifting powerless in space when Captain Kevin Hart's boarding teams seized control of the vessel. What they found in the ship's databanks made even hardened human warriors sick to their stomachs. The Eternal Dominion had served as the mobile headquarters for the Zephyrian Empire's genocide operations for over 20,000 years. Its computers contained detailed records of the systematic extermination of 47 different species, including complete documentation of what had been done to humanity. Video files showed human children being tortured for information about Earth's defenses while their parents were forced to watch. Dr. Ashley Morgan led the team that analyzed the captured records, and what she discovered changed everything the humans thought they knew about the galaxy. Earth had not been the Zephyrians' first victim or even their 10th. The alien empire had been built on a foundation of calculated genocide that stretched back over 50,000 years. "Admiral, these records show a pattern that goes back to the founding of the Zephyrian Empire," Ashley reported to Helen Cross. "They find a promising species, offer them friendship and alliance, then study their weaknesses while pretending to help them develop. When the target species becomes advanced enough to pose a potential threat, the Zephyrians eliminate them completely." The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. The Krellian Commonwealth had been wiped out after developing faster-than-light communication that was superior to Zephyrian technology. The Vorthan Republic had been destroyed when their scientists created new forms of energy production. The Nexari Federation had been exterminated after they began expanding too rapidly into space the Zephyrians wanted for themselves. Each genocide had followed the same pattern. The Zephyrians would approach as friends and offer technological assistance and cultural exchange. They would study their targets for decades or centuries, learning everything about their biology, psychology, and military capabilities. Then they would strike without warning, using the knowledge they had gained through friendship to achieve total victory. Captain Jake Morrison read through files that documented the deaths of trillions of sentient beings across hundreds of worlds. The Zephyrians had kept detailed records of their crimes like they were proud of what they had accomplished. In their military philosophy, genocide was not a crime, but a necessary tool for maintaining galactic stability under their rule. "Jake, look at this," said Dr. Ryan Carter as he brought up a star map showing the current state of Zephyrian space. "According to these records, there are at least 20 species currently under Zephyrian protection. But based on the pattern we have identified, they are all being prepared for eventual elimination." The revelation hit the human command staff like a physical blow. Right now, somewhere in the galaxy, other species were trusting the Zephyrians just as humanity had trusted them 30,000 years ago. Other children were playing with alien friends who were secretly planning to murder them all when the time was right. Admiral Helen Cross made a decision that would reshape the entire galaxy. "We are going to broadcast everything, every record, every video, every piece of evidence we have found. The whole galaxy is going to know exactly what the Zephyrian Empire really is." The transmission went out on every frequency the humans could access, reaching across thousands of light years to touch every corner of known space. The message was simple and devastating. The Zephyrian Empire was not a force for peace and stability, but a machine designed to identify and eliminate any species that might threaten their dominance. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On Meridian Prime, the capital world of the Talon Federation, crowds of bird-like aliens gathered in the streets, demanding answers from their government about their alliance with the Zephyrians. The Talons had been under Zephyrian protection for 800 years, and now they understood that protection was really a death sentence waiting to be carried out. Captain Nina Walsh led intelligence teams to worlds throughout Zephyrian space where they made contact with resistance movements that had been hiding for centuries. Many species had suspected the truth about their alien protectors, but had been too afraid to act on their suspicions. Now they had proof, and they had allies who had already proven they could fight the Zephyrians and win. The human agents found networks of underground fighters on dozens of worlds, all waiting for someone to give them hope that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. The broadcasts from the human fleet provided that hope, and suddenly rebellions began breaking out across alien space as oppressed populations rose up against their masters. On Zirion's 7th, the crystalline shard people used their natural ability to communicate through quantum resonance to coordinate simultaneous attacks on every Zephyrian facility on their world. The aliens had been using the shard people as living computers for their advanced calculations, but now those same mental abilities were turned against them as an unstoppable weapon. The Corvin hives on 12 different worlds expelled their Zephyrian advisors using coordinated swarm tactics that overwhelmed the aliens' superior technology through sheer numbers and perfect coordination. The insect-like Corvins had been bred by the Zephyrians as living weapons, but now they understood they were being prepared for extinction, like all the others. Major Chris Evans coordinated with human sleeper agents who had been hiding throughout Zephyrian space for generations. These were the descendants of humans who had escaped Earth's destruction and spent 30,000 years preparing for this moment. They emerged from their hidden bunkers and safe houses to provide intelligence and support for the growing rebellion. "Admiral, we are receiving reports from 43 star systems," Chris reported. "Local populations are rising up against Zephyrian control, and they are asking for human assistance. The Empire is losing territory faster than they can respond to the uprisings." Helen Cross watched the tactical displays showing Zephyrian space, dissolving into chaos as the truth spread from world to world. Species that had lived under alien control for millennia were finally understanding that their protectors were really their executioners. The galaxy's greatest empire was crumbling as its foundation of lies and deception collapsed. But the most important discovery came from the personal files of Admiral Vexithara himself. The alien commander had been keeping detailed records of future genocide operations, and the list of targets included every major species in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had been planning to eliminate all potential rivals over the next 10,000 years, leaving themselves as the only advanced civilization in known space. They were going to kill everyone, Dr. Jennifer Adams said as she reviewed the aliens' secret files. Every species that could think and build and dream was marked for extinction. The Zephyrians wanted to rule over a galaxy of primitive animals, with no one left who could challenge them. The revelation changed the nature of the conflict from a war of revenge to a war of liberation. Humanity was not just seeking justice for Earth's destruction, but fighting to save every thinking being in the galaxy from a fate worse than death. The human fleet had become the spearhead of a galactic revolution that would determine whether intelligence would survive or perish in the darkness between stars. The final battle for Earth began when the Zephyrian core fleet arrived in the solar system, carrying a weapon designed to crack planets into pieces. Supreme Commander Kethvar himself led the assault aboard the massive fortress ship Eternal Victory. He was the same alien who had helped humanity evacuate Earth 30,000 years ago, and he had returned to finish what his people had started. The weapon called the World Breaker hung beneath Kethvar's flagship, like a metallic tumor the size of a small moon. It had been used to destroy the homeworlds of 16 different species, and now the Zephyrians planned to use it to turn Earth into an asteroid field. They would rather see humanity's birth world completely destroyed than allow the rebels to reclaim it. Admiral Helen Cross positioned the human fleet between Earth and the approaching enemy force, knowing this would be the last battle of the war. Behind her, the planet hung in space like a burned ember, but her scientists had detected something the Zephyrians had missed. Deep beneath the poisoned surface, life still existed in the form of bacterial colonies that had adapted to the toxic environment. "Admiral, the Zephyrians are powering up their planet killer," reported Captain Jake Morrison from his position near Earth's moon. "Energy readings suggest they can fire within the hour." Helen smiled grimly as she activated humanity's final surprise. During the 30,000 years since leaving Earth, her people had not just been developing new weapons and technologies. They had been preparing for this exact moment when they would need to save their homeworld from complete destruction. Dr. Peter Hayes had spent decades designing a network of quantum resonance satellites that could be deployed around Earth in minutes. The satellites would create a dimensional barrier that could deflect even planet-killing weapons, but they needed to be positioned perfectly before the Zephyrians could fire their ultimate weapon. "All ships move to deployment positions," Helen ordered. "We have one chance to save Earth, and we are not going to waste it." The human fleet scattered across Earth's orbital space as hundreds of small ships released the quantum satellites. Each device was no larger than a person, but they contained technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. When activated, they would create a protective shell around Earth that existed partially outside normal space-time. Supreme Commander Kethvar watched the human deployment with confusion and growing alarm. His sensors could not identify what the human devices were supposed to accomplish, but he had learned to fear anything humanity did that he could not understand. The species that had returned from exile was capable of things that violated everything he knew about physics. "Fire the world. Breaker now," Kethvar ordered in his clicking language. "Destroy the planet before they can complete whatever they are planning." The massive weapon discharged with enough energy to sterilize an entire solar system. A beam of pure destruction lanced across space toward Earth, carrying death for every living thing on the planet's surface. But when it struck the quantum barrier, the energy simply vanished as if it had never existed at all. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered as his screens showed the readings from his ultimate weapon. "Nothing can deflect that much energy." Captain Alex Turner's voice came across the communication channels with grim satisfaction. "You are about to learn what happens when you try to destroy the homeworld of a species that has had 30,000 years to plan their return. The human counterattack began with technology the Zephyrians had never seen before. Dimensional missiles phased through the alien fleet's shields and armor to detonate inside their ship's reactor cores. Gravity bombs created artificial black holes that consumed entire squadrons of enemy vessels. Neural viruses spread through Zephyrian communication networks, turning their own computers against them. Captain Kevin Hart led the assault on the Eternal. Victory itself, using boarding pods that could phase through solid matter. His Marines materialized inside the alien flagship's command center and began systematically hunting down the crew with weapons that could target specific genetic markers. Only Zephyrians died while their human slaves and alien prisoners were left unharmed. Supreme Commander Kethvar found himself trapped on his own bridge as human soldiers appeared around him like ghosts. The aliens who had once been the masters of the galaxy were now being hunted through their own ships by an enemy that could walk through walls and shoot around corners. "You cannot do this," Kethvar said in broken human language as Captain Hart approached him with a weapon that hummed with exotic energy. "We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. We brought order to chaos and peace to war." Captain Hart looked at the alien who had helped orchestrate the genocide of 50 billion humans and felt no sympathy at all. "You brought death to innocence and called it peace. You murdered children and called it order. Now you get to experience the justice you denied to so many others." The battle for Earth's orbit lasted only 6 hours. When it ended, the entire Zephyrian core fleet had been reduced to scrap metal drifting in the void. The aliens' ultimate weapon lay broken and powerless, while Earth hung safely in space, protected by human technology and human determination. Dr. Ryan Carter began the process of healing Earth using techniques humanity had perfected while making dead worlds livable during their long exile. The poisoned atmosphere would be cleaned by engineered bacteria that could process toxins into harmless compounds. The dead oceans would be refilled with water from ice asteroids and seeded with microscopic life from 1,000 different worlds. "Admiral, the terraforming process will take approximately 50 years, Ryan reported. "But Earth will live again. The soil can be cleaned and the forests can be replanted. Our homeworld will be green and blue once more." Captain Nina Walsh coordinated with the liberated species throughout the galaxy as they began building new governments based on cooperation instead of domination. The Talon Federation established trade agreements with the Corvin hives, while the Shard people shared their quantum communication technology with anyone who wanted to learn. Jake Morrison stood on Earth's surface for the first time in his life, breathing air that had been filtered and cleaned by human technology. Around him, the first green shoots of new grass were pushing through soil that had been dead for 30,000 years. In the distance, construction robots were building cities that would house the returning children of Earth. "It is beautiful," said Dr. Ashley Morgan as she watched the sunset through an atmosphere that was slowly becoming breathable again. "Our ancestors would be proud to see what we have accomplished." Admiral Helen Cross joined them on the observation platform overlooking the construction site that would become New Geneva. The city would be built directly over the ruins of the old human settlement, using materials salvaged from Zephyrian ships. It would serve as a monument to both the dead and the living, proof that genocide could be avenged and justice could triumph over evil. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Communications Officer Sam Peterson. "The surviving species want to establish a new government with humanity as the senior partners." Helen shook her head slowly. "Tell them we appreciate the offer, but humanity did not fight this war to become the new masters of the galaxy. We fought to ensure that no species would ever again face extinction at the hands of false friends. The human fleet would remain as protectors and peacekeepers, but they would not rule over the species they had liberated. Instead, they would teach them the technologies needed to defend themselves and help them build a civilization based on mutual respect rather than fear and domination." Earth bloomed again under alien suns as seeds from 1,000 worlds took root, in soil that had been barren for millennia. The children of the Exodus fleet came home at last, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, planting hope in ground, watered by the tears of the dead, and fertilized by the promise that such darkness would never return to the galaxy again.